As long as we're talking about garbage Republicans who are not having a good time of it lately, I'd like to talk about Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith of Indiana. Now, I like to keep tabs on Indiana a little bit because both my parents were Hoosiers, my Trumper relatives still live there, but also my non-Trumper relatives that I'm still on speaking terms with live there as well. And so I like to know what's happening in the hellhole of Indiana. No hate to all of y'all blue dots who are fighting the good fight and struggling for democracy and for your own safety in Indiana. Like all of the love and support for y'all right now. And I'm really sorry that you have Micah Beckwith as your lieutenant governor. Now, before I get to this clip from the other day from Wabash Indivisible from Terre Haute, I just want to give everybody who's not familiar with Micah Beckwith a little bit of context. It could not be any more on brand for Indiana, but Micah Beckwith is a self-proclaimed Christian nationalist and a pastor at a church in Noblesville. Again, but tracks. He's said some pretty racist and homophobic shit, and he also seems really preoccupied with the sexuality of adolescents, like a lot of Christian nationalist men are. He's made it his mission to censor what kind of books adolescents and young adults can read. But y'all, it's so much more than that. Let's look at a couple of clips before I show you what he said the other day in his town hall. The first is Micah back in April of this year.
Hey everybody, this is Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith. Want to give you an update on a bill, Senate Bill 289, which is called Unlawful Discrimination Bill. Senator Byrne is carrying that bill. It was in the Senate just a few minutes ago. Well, if you were watching or listening to the Senate, if you were trying to fall asleep and we're trying to get some good background noise on, you might have been listening. The Senate on the Democrat side, they got up and they started talking about how this bill embodies something to the effect of the Three-Fifths Compromise. They were bringing that up. They were saying this is a bad bill because it actually encourages discrimination, just like the Three-Fifths Compromise, going all the way back to the foundations of our nation. I would like to share with you the Three-Fifths Compromise is not a pro-discrimination compromise. It was not a pro-discrimination or a slave-driving compromise that the founders made. It was actually just the opposite. It was a compromise that the North made with the South. At the time, there were basically 13 independent nations. They had not really created a constitution. They were sort of a European Union-esque nation, and they were saying to the pro-slave states, hey, if you want to count your slaves to have representation, more representation in Congress, we're not going to let you do that, because they knew that that would codify things like slavery into our nation. The North stood up to the South, and they said, we're going to, if you're going to count your property, because the South says, hey, this is our property, but we want to count them
in human beings.
Congressional representation. We want to count them in the census.
Human beings.
There was 30,000 people would equal one member of Congress. And so they said, we're going to count our slaves. We're going to get more members of Congress in the South. The North said, you can't do that. So what they came back to the South, and they said, fine, if you want to count your property, your slaves, as whole people, we're going to count our property. We're going to count our tables. We're going to count our chairs. We're going to count all the stuff that we have in our house. And the South said, well, you can't do that. And they said, well, you're doing it with your property. We're doing it with our.
The more that goes on, the angrier I'm going to get. So, yeah, you heard that. Micah Beckwith said that the Three-Fifths Compromise was a great move and that it was good policy. Just so you know, Micah's comments, which he doubled down on days later, saying, quote, I said exactly what needed to be said. Those comments, which have been resoundingly condemned as historical revisionism, were called out by Indiana State Representative Earl Harris Jr. as, quote, a gross misunderstanding of history and purposefully whitewashing history for political gain. Now, as shocked as you and I may be to see how emboldened white Christian nationalists are in 2025, this has been on brand for, again, self-described Christian nationalist Micah Beckwith for many years. Now, when he was running for lieutenant governor on the shared ticket with U.S. Senator Mike Braun, he accused the Democratic candidate for governor, Jennifer Goodwin, a former Republican, by the way, of having, quote, boldness for immorality and, quote, a Jezebel spirit. He's also perpetuated a number of conspiracy theories, including the notion that our public schools are teaching children to be gay. They're converting kids to gayness, and that they are also teaching children how to have oral sex, and said that our public schools have become, quote, indoctrinated with Marxist ideology. So, like, not surprising he said that about our public schools, that this year he also made this claim.
Government can't keep propping up these programs that serve the least of these. Why? Because God never designed government to serve the least of these. It was never government's job to take care of the sick, the orphan, the poor, or the widow. It was always the church's job.
The church
if
is not
government
doing
would
it.
just get that through its thick skull, that it can't do this very well, so stop trying.
He thinks social welfare programs, safety net programs that our tax dollars fund should be done away with. The reason that we have all of these programs is, first of all, I know that Micah Beckwith wants us to have a theocratic state, right? He wants a white Christian nation. He wants Christo-fascism. But he's like, the church should care for all of these people, but they don't. That's why our tax dollars are meant to do that. And also, we have the separation of church and state. When you have pastors like him who think that women who are not at home barefoot and pregnant washing the dishes have a Jezebel spirit, who think that we need to defund public education because it is indoctrinated with Marxist ideology. I bet he could not tell me a single fucking thing that Marx has said. Like, why on earth, when you have churches that are filled with hate, that are all about judgment, condemnation, retribution, why on earth would you have a society where you expect those folks to care for widows and orphans, for the poor, for people in need, for disabled people, for the elderly? So that just gives you like a little context, a little window into the mind of Micah Beckwith. So this is what he said in a town hall, like I think it was 2 days ago now, outside of Terre Haute, Indiana. Again, thank you to Wabash Indivisible for this clip. If you've not found a local Indivisible group, highly recommend that you go join up with them. Great grassroots organization defending democracy.
Why are they taking them from
If you'd like to ask a question, you can get in line, and then I can answer your question.
But are you going to make sure all the people coming to Camp Atterbury have had due process?
So due process is, in this situation, is, are you here legally?
That isn't due
That is
process.
due process.
No, it's not.
Due
So,
process
if
is
we-
getting arrested and charged with a crime
If you-
and seeing a judge, and these people
No.
are not seeing a
Listen.
judge. That's not true.
They don't have a right to see a judge. Bombing Pearl Harbor, did we give them due process to actually see a judge?
No,
Yes.
we put them in concentration
They
camps.
invaded our country.
We put them in
stopped
concentration
them from
camps.
invading
Have
our
you heard?
country. This is crazy. Hey, how many illegals have you brought into your house?
Oh my God,
How
that's
many?
so
How many?
embarrassing for you.
How much
What kind
money
of
have
question
you
is
given
that?
to? What have you
So
done?
let me explain something right now.
Yeah. What have you done to serve them? Is
What have I done? Well,
Christian,
let's see.
yeah.
I've worked with many. If you can't be quiet, you're welcome to.
So that conversation was about how the Defense Department has confirmed that Camp Atterbury is going to be used as a concentration camp for immigrants. Now, Micah did the like consistently interrupting his constituent in order to just like do the debate bro tactic of like, I'm going to pummel you with a bunch of ridiculous questions. Like, how many undocumented people have you brought into your home? That's what our taxes are supposed to cover. They're supposed to help asylum seekers get status here and be able to be incorporated into American society. Our taxes are already funding that. This ridiculous, fallacious, like just the stupidest straw man of you can't care about immigrants unless you're willing to take them into your home. That's embarrassing for you, Micah. That's the best you fucking got. Also, the like fragile man, crush your arms and sway back and forth. No intention of listening to his constituents. Also, he flat out fucking lied. This is Hoosiers. This is your lieutenant governor. He said that undocumented immigrants, documented immigrants, immigrants here seeking asylum, immigrants here with green cards, that they don't get due process. He said they're here illegally, except they're not. You heard a constituent say, they're here seeking asylum. We have seen loads of people who are using our legal pathways to be able to stay in this country, get permanent resident status, become American citizens, are being snatched up and stuffed into immigration facilities, aka concentration camps. They've broken no laws. And without due process, white Christian nationalists like Micah Beckwith here can just say they're illegal. We can lock them up for however long we want. They don't get to see a judge. They don't get to have any rights at all extended to them. This is what we're dealing with. This is straight up fascism. That shit that Micah spat out of his mouth, straight up fascism. How do you know if somebody's status is illegal without due process? How do you know if someone has broken a law without due process? If some chuckle fuck from the government says that they're a criminal, says that they're illegal, that should be the determining factor. Why do you think we have a constitution to protect us from shit like that? Hoosiers, this should be profoundly concerning to y'all. I understand a lot of you are deep in the cult of MAGA. Thank you to those who aren't. Keep fighting the good fight.